So how exactly the blood travels from the heart to different organs and from the organs to back to the heart. So that is the circulatory pathway. Rhythmic contractile activity of the heart, therefore it is called as the pacemaker. So we human beings, we have a 4-chambered heart, right? We have 2 upper atria and 2 lower ventricles, right? But in fishes, they have only 2-chambered heart. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to another session on chapter 18, that is body fluids and circulation. I am Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous session of this chapter, we had discussed about the ABO blood grouping and the RH grouping, right? And wherein we learned that based on that, the blood groups assigned to human beings are A, B, AB and O. In today's session, we shall discuss about the circulatory system, how exactly the blood moves into and out of the heart. So we need to study in detail the human circulatory system. So to begin with, we shall study about the circulatory pathway. So before moving on to studying the human circulatory system, let us know about the different circulatory pathways that are there. So usually the circulatory pathways, that is the heart, right? So how exactly the blood travels from the heart to different organs and from the organs to back to the heart. So that is the circulatory pathway. So there are 2 types of circulatory pathway. One is the open circulatory pathway and the other one is the closed circulatory pathway. So talking about the open circulatory system. So open circulatory system are usually found in organisms belonging to the arthropods and the molluscans. So one of the best example, arthropods, that is the insects. So I've taken here grasshopper as an example for the open circulatory system. So they are usually found in arthropods and mollusks. And what happens in this open circulatory system? Exactly here, the blood that is pumped by the heart, it passes through large vessels and then directly into the open spaces of the body cavity called as the sinuses. So I'll tell you the difference here. When we human beings, we have a closed circulatory system. So in a closed circulatory system, what happens? There are a lot of different veins that are there that carries the blood in a channelized manner to different organs, right? But in the case of open circulatory system, what happens? That is, the blood is carried through large blood vessels and these blood vessels directly pass those blood into the organs. So therefore, the organs and all that are there in the body, they'll entirely bathe in blood. In our body, does the organs entirely bathe in blood? No. Right? Because particular channels or particular veins are there which will carry the blood to particular organs. That is not in the case of open circulatory system. So as you can see here, there is the heart. The heart has 2 large veins are there. That is, they have large vessels. We call it as large vessels. So through these large vessels, the blood travels and directly whatever organ is there, the organs bathe in the blood. So this is called as open circulatory system. So next, moving on to closed circulatory system. So this is one more kind of the circulatory pathway. So most of the annelids and the chordates, that is, they have the closed circulatory system. Apart from that, closed circulatory system is also found in mammals like us. So annelids and chordates have a closed circulatory system. So here we have taken the example of earthworm, which is an annelid. It belongs to Annelida. Here in the closed circulatory system, the blood is pumped by the heart and that blood is circulated through a closed network of blood vessels. So if you can see here, the blood is pumped by the heart, but there is a closed network of blood vessels that actually carry the blood to different organs of the body. So therefore, it is not like, say for example, in open circulatory system, you have a bucket of water and you put different organs into it. What happens? All the organs will get covered by blood, right? That is open circulatory system. But in closed circulatory system, what happens? Here imagine there are pipes. So this pipe will carry the blood to one particular organ, the other pipe to one particular organ. So that is how they have a lot of veins which carry the blood to the respective organs here. So that is nothing but the closed circulatory system. So this pattern is considered to be more advantageous. Why is it more advantageous? Because the flow of fluid is more precise here and it is more regulated, precisely regulated. But in the case of open circulatory system, because they do not have specific veins to carry the blood, they just have a large vessel. It is not more specific or more precisely regulated in the case of open circulatory system. So this is about the two types of circulatory pathways, the closed circulatory pathway and the open circulatory pathway. And we human beings, we have the closed circulatory pathway. So we shall study about the heart now. So we'll directly move into studying about the human heart, not just the human heart in general. Now we'll study about the hearts, the different, like how many chambers are there in the heart. We understood now the circulation of blood in heart takes place in two ways. One is open circulatory system and closed circulatory system. Next, what about the chambers in the heart? Do you think all the organisms have a four-chambered heart? We mammals, that is we human beings, we have four-chambered heart. Do others also have four-chambered heart? No, they do not. We shall look into it. So talking about the heart chambers. So all vertebrates possess a muscular chambered heart. So any vertebrate, any animal coming under the vertebrata group, they have a muscular heart. But how many chambers are there in the heart is the question now. So let's talk about fishes. So when you look into fishes, they also have a muscular chambered heart, but they only have a two-chambered heart. So we human beings, we have a four-chambered heart, right? We have two upper atria and two lower ventricles, right? But in fishes, they have only two-chambered heart. So a two-chambered heart with one atrium and a ventricle. So if you can see here, they just have one atrium and one ventricle. So it is just a two-chambered heart in the case of fishes. Next, talking about the amphibians and the reptiles. So amphibians and reptiles, they have a three-chambered heart. So they have a three-chambered heart. So three-chambered heart means they have two atria and one ventricle. But always remember, in the case of reptiles, all the reptiles have a three-chambered heart. But it is only the crocodiles that have a four-chambered heart. So crocodile is an exception here. So this is one of the important one-mark question they can ask. Which is the reptilian that has four-chambered heart? It is the crocodile here. So here, if you can see here, we shall look into the amphibians and the reptiles. So if you can see here, amphibians and almost all the reptiles, they have a three-chambered heart. What are there in the three-chambered heart? They have one atrium here, one more atrium here and one ventricle. Therefore, three-chambered hearts are there. In the case of fishes, they have one atrium and one ventricle. So, two-chambered heart. Next, talking about reptiles again here. I told you all the reptiles also have a three-chambered heart. Just like how amphibians have a three-chambered heart, right? All reptiles also have a three-chambered heart. The exception is crocodiles. Crocodiles have a four-chambered heart. What four-chambered heart? They have two auricles and two ventricles. So that is why it is a four-chambered heart. So next, talking about the crocodiles, the birds and the mammals. So all these, the crocodiles, the birds and the mammals, they possess a four-chambered heart, wherein the four-chambered have two ventricles. So if you can see here, the bird and the, so if you can see here, the bird and the mammals. The bird and the mammals also, they have two atriums and two ventricles. Here also, the mammals also have two atriums and two ventricles. Therefore, how many chamber? 1, 2, 3 and 4 chamber heart. So this is about the chambers, that is the heart chambers. So next, moving on to the circulation. So we studied about two circulatory pathways, open circulatory pathway and closed circulatory pathway, and we studied about the heart chambers. We came to know in fishes there are two-chambered heart. In almost all the reptiles except crocodile, amphibians, they have three-chambered heart, and mammals, crocodiles and birds have four-chambered heart. Now, how exactly circulation occurs in a 2-chambered, a 3-chambered and a 4-chambered heart we shall look into. So, talking about circulation in fishes, what did I tell you? The fishes, they have a 2-chambered heart, right? So, how does the circulation occur in a 2-chambered heart? So, in fishes, the heart pumps out deoxygenated blood. That is, the heart, the deoxygenated blood enters into the heart so that it can carry the oxygen, right? So here in fishes, the heart pumps out the deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated by the gills and supplied to the body parts from where deoxygenated blood is returned to the heart. Be familiar about this because we have studied about this already in respiration process, right? So how exchange of gases takes place between the pulmonary region and the heart, right? We had studied about that, the cardiac region and the pulmonary region. Same thing concept also comes here. So what I want you to do is, if you have forgotten that, please watch those videos and then come into this chapter so that you can easily understand even better. So here what happens? The heart pumps out deoxygenated blood. So here the gills. So, like how we have lungs for respiration, fishes have gills for respiration, right? So, therefore, the gills of the fishes are connected to the heart. Like how our lungs is connected to the heart, just like that, the gills of the fishes are connected to the heart. So, the gills, if you can see, there is the artery. So, here they have given oxygenated rich blood in red color and deoxygenated blood in blue color. So, deoxygenated blood means oxygen has been removed and the blood is deprived of oxygen, or it is poor of oxygen. So, that is what is blue in color. So, now through this side, the deoxygenated blood travels, deoxygenated. And through the other side, the oxygenated blood travels. So, if you can see here, the oxygenated blood will travel from the gills. It will come like this. It will enter into the body capillaries because it will be given to the body tissues. And once the blood dumps the oxygen in the body tissues, now it is a deoxygenated blood. Why? It has lost the oxygen, right? It has already dumped the oxygen into the body tissues. So from there, the deoxygenated blood will be carried back to the heart and then it will be carried to the gills so that it should go out of the fish, right? So that is how it occurs. So this is about the circulation in fishes. So in fishes, that is why it is a simple circulation wherein 2 chambers of the heart are involved here. So next, moving further, we shall see circulation in amphibians and in reptiles. So in amphibians and reptiles, what is number of chambers the heart have? It is 3-chambered. Except in crocodile, which is also a reptile, it has 4-chambered. So here the left atrium receives the oxygenated blood. The left atrium receives the oxygenated blood from the gills, lungs or skin, because amphibians, reptiles and all that, they are dwellers of both water as well as land, right? Most of them. So amphibians, all the amphibians, dwellers of water and land. Reptiles, most of them are dwellers of water and land as well. So that is why either their respiratory organs can be gills, lungs or skin. For example, frogs respire through skin. We have learnt about it, right? And the right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood from the other body parts. However, what happens here is they get mixed up in the single ventricle which pumps out the mixed blood. Therefore, it is an incomplete double circulation. So, what type of circulation the amphibians and the reptiles exhibit? They exhibit incomplete kind of circulation. Why incomplete kind of circulation? Because they have only one ventricle there, and because of the presence of one ventricle, the blood gets mixed up in this particular case. As you can see here, again here, the left side which is there, it is the oxygenated blood. The right side, it is the deoxygenated blood. So, from the pulmonary circuit, this is the pulmonary circuit. What is the pulmonary organ in the case of these reptiles and amphibians? It is either the gills, the lungs or the skin, right? So, they carry the oxygenated blood. It will be delivered to the left atrium and the ventricle, and then it will be carried to the different body parts, and then it will move into the, that is, ventricle region. Now when it enters into the ventricle region, there two auricles are there, but ventricles are only one, right? So in such cases, what might happen is, because ventricle is only one, there is chances of mixing up of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So that is why it is called as an incomplete circulation. So that is the kind of circulation that is seen in amphibians and reptiles. Moving further, circulation in birds and mammals. So in birds and mammals, how many chambers of the heart has? It has 4 chambers, right? 2 atria and 2 ventricles. So oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and the right atria respectively passes on to the ventricles on the same sides. So here, as you can see, it is a 4-chambered heart. It is a 4-chambered heart. There is a pulmonary circuit wherein the lungs will take up the oxygen. The oxygen will reach the alveoli of the lungs. From the alveoli, the blood will receive the oxygen and carry it. This is the oxygenated blood, and carry it into the left atria, and from the left atria, it will carry it into the body tissues. Once in the body tissues, the blood dumps all the oxygen. Now the blood is deoxygenated. That deoxygenated blood will be carried to the right atria and the right ventricle, and then it will move into the pulmonary circuit. That is, it will go back to the lungs, and from the lungs it will go out through the nostrils. So that is how the circulation occurs in the case of birds and mammals. The same thing in the case of humans also, because human beings, we also have a 4-chambered heart, right? So the ventricles pump it out without any mixing up. So the ventricles pump out the deoxygenated blood without mixing it with the oxygenated blood. But remember what happens in the case of amphibians and reptiles, except for crocodiles. What happens there? Because only one ventricle is there, there is mixing up of the oxygen and the deoxygenated blood. But that problem is not there here. But even that problem was not there in the case of fishes. Why? Because fishes, they had only one atria and one ventricle. So that problem was not there. But here, what is happening in the case of reptiles and amphibians? There they have 2 atria and 1 ventricle. So that is why when the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood gets mixed up in the ventricle. But all that doesn't occur in the case of the mammals as well as the birds. So therefore, it is a 2 separate circulatory pathways which are present in these organisms. That is why it is called as a double circulation. Even we human beings, we exhibit double circulation, because the one side of the heart, that is the left ventricle, are responsible for carrying the oxygenated blood, and the right atria and the right ventricle are responsible for carrying the deoxygenated blood. So therefore, 2 circulation are involved here. Therefore, it is also called as the double circulation. There it was, in the case of amphibians and reptiles, it was the incomplete circulation because of the mixing up of the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood. So since you have understood so much, now it will be easy for you to understand the circulatory pathway in human beings. So we shall study about the human circulatory system, and here, because in this human circulatory system, blood is the liquid that actually flows and carries the oxygen. It is also called as the blood vascular system. So we shall study about the blood vascular system or the human circulatory system. So we human beings, we consist of a muscular chambered heart, right? Our heart is muscular, it is chambered. We are also mammals. We also have a muscular chambered heart, and a network of closed branching blood vessels and blood, the fluid which is circulated. So how does the fluid, that is the blood, get circulated from the heart to different tissues and from different body tissues back to the heart? It is through a network of blood vessels, and therefore it is a closed circulatory system. And where is the heart exactly situated? The heart in humans is exactly situated in the thoracic cavity, that is towards the left side. In the thoracic cavity, it is situated in between the 2 lungs, slightly tilted to the left. And it has the size of a heart is of a clenched fist. So if your palm that is there, if you just fold it like this, how much the size of your clenched fist is there, that is the size of your heart. So the heart is so very small, but imagine it performs such a major activity in the body, right? So our whole body activity depends on the heart, because at the end of the day, even the brain also requires oxygen, and the heart is the one that actually supplies that. So that is why it is a very important organ. So it is the size of a clenched fist. And how is the heart protected? So it is protected. Of course, our lungs are protected by ribs. We have studied earlier. But what about the heart? The heart is protected by a double-walled membranous bag, which is called as the pericardium. And between these two pericardium, there is a pericardial fluid that is present. So the heart, if you look at the heart here, you can see it is four-chambered, it is muscular in nature, and it is the size of a clenched fist, and it is covered by the pericardium, which is a protective membrane. So the pericardium actually forms like a bag which protects the heart in it. So that is about the general structure of the heart. So moving further, we'll study about the chambers of the heart. So our human heart is made up of four chambers, right? So there are two relatively smaller upper chambers called as the atria. So the upper chambers, so you can see here right atrium, one upper chamber towards this side, and left atrium. So there are two small chambers, upper chambers. One is the right atrium and the other one is the left atrium. And below the two atrium, there are present two larger chambers, lower chambers called as the ventricles. So if you can see here, we have larger chamber. You can easily make out the difference, right? The atrias are very small. Ventricles are larger. So two larger chamber, that is the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So this is about the chambers of the heart. Now, how does this chamber form? So when we say a chamber, how can we say it is a chamber? It is four sides, it is covered by wall, right? A room. How do you say it is a room? If it was not covered, then will you call it a room? No, right? It is covered by walls. Just like that, how does this four chamber form actually? Actually, this four chamber forms because there is a thin muscular wall called as the interatrial septum that separates the right and the left atria. So, how the right and the left atria are separated. So, if you can see here, the right atrium is separated from the left atrium by a very thin interseptal wall that is present between them. Next, talking about the ventricle. How is the left ventricle separated from the right ventricle? So, between the left and the right ventricle, there is a thick wall that is present, which is called as the interventricular septum. So, what are the two walls that forms the chambers? The left atrium and the right atrium are separated by a interatrial septum. The right ventricle and the left ventricle are separated by the interventricular septum. So, therefore, these separates the left and the right ventricle. So, therefore, because of the presence of the septums, actually, the heart looks like it is having a four chamber. So, this was about the chambers of the heart. Next, moving further to different parts. So, let's talk in detail about the human circulatory system here. I'll just draw it in the form of a box. So, imagine this is the heart. So, what did I tell you? So, here we have the right atrium, the left atrium. So, left atrium and right atrium. Then we have the right ventricle here and the left ventricle. So, the right atrium and the left atrium is separated by interatrial septum, right? The right ventricle and the left ventricle is separated by interventricular septum. What about the right atrium and the right ventricle? What about the left atrium and the left ventricle? How are they separated? Now we know two chambers are there because there is a septum in between here, right? But what about four chambers now? So here the atrium and the ventricle on the same side are separated by thick fibrous tissue called as the atrioventricular septum. So here the right atrium and the right ventricle are separated by the right atrioventricular septum. The left atrium and the left ventricle are separated by the left atrioventricular septum. So that is how they are separated. So therefore forming 4 chambers like this. So each of these septa are provided with an opening through which the 2 chambers of the same side are connected. So between this right atrium and right ventricle there is an opening. Between the left atrium and the left ventricle there is an opening, right? So why? Because connectivity should be there. So though wall is there should be an opening, because this side the oxygenated blood will be there, this side the deoxygenated blood should travel. So that is why they are interconnected to one another. So here talking about the opening between the right atrium and the right ventricle. So right atrium and right ventricle there is an opening, there is a connectivity. But in spite of that there is a flap present in the opening here, and that flap it is called as a valve. And these valves are nothing but they are made up of 3 muscular flaps, or it is also called as cusps, because there is a flap. So I'll just write here in this opening that is there, it is covered by a flap. That flap is also called as cusps. And how many layers it is made up of? It is made up of 3 layers. That is why it is called as a tricuspid valve. Next, talking about the left atrium and the left ventricle. The left atrium and the left ventricle is separated by the atrioventricular septum, right? So in between these two, though it is separated by a atrioventricular septum, there is an opening. Now in this opening also it is guarded by a flap. That flap it is called as the bicuspid or the mitral wall. So this flap, the flap is present here, or it is also called as cusps, but it is made up of 2 layers. That is why it is called as bicuspid wall. Bicuspid wall, or it is also called as the mitral wall. So it guards the opening between the left atrium and the left ventricle. So I hope you have understood this. Now the heart is made up of 4 chambers. The right atrium and the left atrium are separated by the interatrial septum, and the right ventricle and the left ventricle are separated by the interventricular septum. The right atrium and the right ventricle are separated by the atrioventricular septum, and the left atrium and the left ventricle are also separated by the atrioventricular septum. So here, though they are separated by the septums, between the right atrium and the right ventricle there is an opening that is present, and also between the left atrium and the left ventricle there is an opening present. Though there are openings present, the openings are covered or protected by a valve. Openings of the right atrium and the right ventricle are protected by flap walls, which are called as flaps or cusps, and it is 3 layered. Hence it is called as a tricuspid wall. The opening between the left atrium and the left ventricle are also protected by flaps and cusps, but it is made up of 2 layers, and therefore it is called as a bicuspid wall, and it is also called as the mitral wall. So much we have understood about the heart now. So moving further. Now the openings of the right and the left ventricles into the pulmonary artery. There is a pulmonary artery, right? There has to be a connectivity between the lungs and the heart. Why? Because it is the lungs that actually provide the oxygen to the heart. So therefore there has to be a connectivity between the pulmonary system and the circulatory system, or the systemic circulatory system. So the openings of the right and the left ventricles into the pulmonary artery. So opening of the right ventricle and the left ventricle into the pulmonary artery. If you can see here, the ventricles, we can see here 2 ventricular chambers are there. So the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So this right ventricle and left ventricle are connected to a pulmonary artery. This pulmonary artery is connected to the lungs, because it is from there they have to carry the oxygenated blood. So next, moving further. So into the pulmonary artery and the aorta respectively are provided with semilunar valves. Now there also there is valves present which are called as semilunar valves. The valves in the heart allows the flow of blood only in one direction. Now we understood why valves are important. What did we learn? The left atrium and the left ventricle are separated or protected by a valve which is called as tricuspid valve, and the left atrium and the left ventricle are protected by the walls called as the bicuspid wall. Now these walls, why were the walls important? Why were the walls important? Because the blood should not revert and flow back, because the flow of blood should be unidirectional. So that is the reason why walls are very important. That is, from the atria, the blood has to flow to the ventricles. How? The oxygenated blood should flow from the left atria to the left ventricle, and the deoxygenated blood should flow from the right ventricle to the right atria. So that is how it has to occur. So therefore, that is why these walls are present. So these walls actually prevent any backward flow, so that only the blood flows in unidirectional. Blood flow should not become backwards. If the blood starts flowing backwards, what happens? Again, the deoxygenated blood will go back to the body tissues. That should not happen, right? Like exactly how in digestion there were walls present between the esophagus and the stomach, so that the food should not enter back into the esophagus once it enters the stomach. Same way here also, the same mechanism in order to prevent the backward flow of the blood. So that is the reason, so that unidirectional flow of the blood can be maintained. So moving further, here the entire, now talking about the entire heart. So the entire heart is made up of cardiac muscles. Our heart is a muscular chambered heart, 4-chambered heart, right? So what type of muscles it contains? It contains cardiac muscles. You might remember we had studied about this in one of the chapters, the different types of muscles. So the walls of the ventricles are much thicker than that of the atria. So the walls of the ventricles are thicker than that of the atria, and a specialized cardiac musculature called the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. So apart from the some of the nodal tissues, if you can see, these nodal tissues are also distributed in the heart apart from the cardiac muscle. So a patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium, which is called as the sinoatrial node. So there are two types of nodes that are present. So the heart is muscular in nature. What type of muscle it is made up of? It is made up of cardiac muscle. Apart from having cardiac muscle, the heart is also made up of nodes. What are the two types of nodes the heart is made up of? The heart is made up of the sinoatrial node, that is SAN, and it is made up of one more, the atrioventricular node, that is called as the AVN. So what is the sinoatrial node? Where exactly it is present? So sinoatrial node is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium. So if you can see here, the sinoatrial node, it is present in the atrium. Where exactly in the atrium? Exactly right upper corner of the atrium. Next, talking about the atrioventricular node. So this is SAN, this is AVN. Where is it present? It is present in the ventricular region. So the atrioventricular node, if you can see, it is present in the ventricular region, in the left corner of the right atrium, close to the atrioventricular septum. If you can see here, it is present exactly in the right corner, and it is present in between the atrioventricular septum. That is the septum which divides the right atrium from the right ventricle. So there exactly the atrioventricular node is present. So another mass of this tissue is also seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium, close to the atrioventricular septum. So if you can see here, one more as we had studied here, which is present in the atrioventricular septum. So these are the different types of nodes that are present. So apart from being muscular in nature, made up of cardiac muscles, they also have two types of nodes called as the sinoatrioventricular node. So this is about the heart. So here we were talking about two types of nodes, that is the sinoatrial nodes and the atrioventricular nodes. So a bundle of, apart from that, a bundle of nodal fibers called as the atrioventricular bundle, it continues from the atrioventricular bundle, which passes through the atrioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum, and then it immediately divides into a right and left bundle. If you can see here, there are these atrioventricular node is there that actually continues, and it divides into two nodes, that is towards the right ventricle and towards the left ventricle. They divide in the form of fibers. and these branches, they give rise to minute fibers throughout the ventricular musculature, and it is called as the Purkinje fibers. So these fibers are nothing but they are very, very minute, and they are also called as the Purkinje fibers. So moving further, so the nodal musculature as the ability. So what is the use of that nodal musculature or the nodal fibers? They actually have the ability to generate certain action potentials without any external stimuli. That is, it is auto-excitable. That is true, right? Our heart is auto-excitable. Throughout it will keep beating. So that auto-excitable nature is because of the nodal musculature that is there. However, the number of action potentials that could be generated in a minute vary at different parts of the nodal system. So our heart beats, right? But that can vary at different parts of the nodal system based on the action potentials that is carried out by the nodal musculature that is there. So here talking about the two different nodes. So the SAN, that is the sinoatrial node, which is present in the right corner of the right atrium, can generate the maximum number of action potential. How much? It can generate an action potential of 70 to 75 per minute. So our heart beats, right? We can feel our heart beating. So that beating that is there in the, that is the SAN, that is the sinoatrial node that is there in the right atria, it can generate the action potential. How many numbers it can beat? That is 70 to 75 times per minute. And it is responsible for initiating and also maintaining the rhythmic contractile activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called as the pacemaker. So why this SAN is called as the pacemaker? Because it is the one that actually helps in maintaining the rhythmic beating of the heart. How many times? Around 7 to 75 times per minute. And the heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, and average is about 72 beats per minute. So why is that beating? It is because of the impulses created in the sinoatrial nodes, which is present in the region of the right atrium. So that is the reason. So this is about the heart. Now you know which is the nodal region. So apart, we all used to believe that it is the muscles of the heart that beat, but apart from muscles, there are also nodes that are present. In that, especially the sinoatrial node is the one that actually generates this action potential of the heart beating or contracting and relaxing. So that how many times it occurs? It occurs about 70 to 75 times per minute, or we can consider it as an average as 72 beats per minute. So since we know about this, in the next session, we shall study about the cardiac cycle and how the ECG reading is done, and all that we shall study there in detail. So this was about the human circulatory system. So I hope you understood the session well. So in this session, we dealt with the different types of heart, that is the different types of circulation that is present, open circulatory system and closed circulatory system. We understood in we human beings, we have the closed circulatory system, and also we studied about the different chambered heart, that is fishes have 2 chambered, amphibians and reptiles except the crocodiles have 3 chambered, the crocodile, various birds and mammals including we human beings, we have 4 chambered heart. And how exactly circulation occurs in these we studied, and also we learnt about the human circulatory system, that is how exactly circulation occurs in detail in a 4 chambered heart, taking human as an example. So this, and also we learnt about the beating of a heart, how many times the heart beats, and exactly we understood which is the region that actually results in beating of the heart. That was a sinoatrial node that was responsible for the rhythmic beating of the heart. So I hope you understood the session well. In the coming session, we shall meet with the interesting topic wherein we'll understand the cardiac cycle, and also we'll learn about the ECG, how the reading in the ECG is taken and all that. So we shall meet again in the coming session. Thank you.